are not going to tell you that any more than the banker is going to show you an amortization schedule. Most people don't know enough to ask for it. Americans are taught in school to be sheep. This should be the first thing you are taught, that if you're going to borrow money, it's going to kill you and the society. And let me switch just for a minute to what is known as the end days prophecies, something that a guy named Christ gave to the people when they asked him what's going to happen. He said, look for the stars, look up, look for the stars and the signs in the heaven. The stars will seem to fall from the sky, the moon will turn to blood, and the earth, the firmament, will be shaken. He said, at this point, you know that the time it's here. You know, it's happening. And so what are all of these things pointing to? This points to a great comet coming through the solar system. And my science work has pointed out that there are many of these objects, many, many, many Planet X objects. So what is the misinformation that is pounded out to the public with all of the books, all of the phony authors, all of the phony Colburn authors that are out there trying to pump information to the public? All of those books have something on the cover. It's a big orange ball. Remember 2003, Crazy Lady Talks to Aliens, The End of the World, Planet X? The cover of the book, that book was a big orange ball, and she repeatedly said, look up on May 15th, 2003, you will see a giant orange ball in the sky. That's Planet X. Well, really, it was a very special condition, full moon rising. And so, of course, this needed professional astronomers, this whole campaign of Crazy Lady Talks to Aliens, May 15th, 2003, End of the World, Planet X, that was all started in around 1995. That's how far in advance that misinformation campaign was planned. And so you see that these people are busy at work to try and influence the public. And then, of course, the fallout from that would be massive suicides. People commit suicides due to Planet X, and it's just those crazy people who follow somebody that pretends or claims to talk to aliens. So at any rate, all of this is underway right now. The Comet Elenin campaign that is currently underway, raging on the internet, trying to destroy the concepts of Planet X or the real concepts, trying to destroy my name and work. Just on and on. It doesn't end. These people, there's a tremendous effort to snow the public with just incorrect information. NASA in the thick of it, claiming this week that there's a brown dwarf 4 times the size of Jupiter that's out in the Oort cloud, this imaginary cloud of snowball comets that's too far away to detect, but it's in the textbooks all the way up through graduate school, something that cannot even be detected or ever could be detected or confirmed, is solidly in place in textbooks. That's the level of science today. Fairy tale science, I call it. That's all it is. It's just fairy tales, and people are getting PhDs in this and flying around the world to scientific meetings. Tier 2 science is alive and well. Just a highlight here on Comet Elenin, NASA has released pictures in this last week and showing that it's a small comet, according to their photos, and has an orbit as originally described, so I only can trust that those photos are real. And it looks very much convincing. Besides, if the Comet Elenin entity, if the Comet Elenin were some brown dwarf, huge thing that had all kinds of effects on Earth, where it is in its orbit right now, you could go out in your backyard at night and see it with the naked eye. You wouldn't need professional grade equipment to see it. But it's simply not there. It's very difficult to find with even good amateur equipment. So, but that doesn't matter. The internet misinformation rages on. the point is that the poor person out there is just barraged with misinformation regarding the true nature of our solar system, which is that comets are not dirty snowballs. Comets are discharges of the solar capacitor. Some of these comets, very, very, very few of them can be large, but when a big one comes through, the effects are devastating at that time. What caused this? What was the physical source of all of this activity? And when you look at it closely, very clearly, these issues were caused by a passing large comet. And we know today that that large comet was Venus. Was the comet Venus coming through the solar system, eventually ending up in its orbit where it is today? But gee, that doesn't make any sense if you're NASA. Gee, that couldn't be true because comets are just little snowballs. They couldn't affect Earth. They couldn't cause electrical discharges. They couldn't cause phenomenon on Earth. They're just little snowballs, poofy little things that melt when they get near the sun. That's the NASA statement. But you can see why it's so important to destroy history. And there's some people out there who've been borrowing and destroying the real story of history for a long time. Full-scale attack on the internet, and this was, of course, well planned long ago because as you can probably guess, Comet Elenin was discovered long ago by NASA. And so all of the dates, all of the misinformation campaign, and I might say that possibly some man-made events based on dating of Comet Elenin. It's not that Comet Elenin is going to cause anything, but the dates when it has alignments may be the issue. And so just to kind of go along with this concept of economic terrorism, and we all know who these people are, the representatives in the United States of the European bankers, the Federal Reserve, which basically tells the federal government what to do. As one of the Rockefellers once said, if you give me the power of the money in a country, I will own that country, and that's absolutely what's happened. Government has to shut off your electric power. Okay, so this is my August 16th posting on my webpage, jmccsci.com. Why the government has to shut off your electric power. I just finished reading the latest reports on the state of the U.S. economy, and two things are clear. The USA is on the brink of its final throes of economic collapse. This was not by accident, but has been a methodical war waged in Washington by the bureaucratic puppets we call Congress and the President. They are puppets of the international banking community, which has targeted the USA as the final land to fall before complete worldwide one world government can take place. The USA was saved until last because it was needed to take down the rest of the world physically and economically before they took down the USA as the last stronghold of a functional economic society. I'm going to interject here too that France, which is the core central point of Europe, is on its way down. Okay, continuing on. The second point is that along with the collapse of the USA economy will come immense civil unrest. It is on the brink of that state right now, but as with any civil unrest scenarios that take to the streets, it will be easy for the controlling elite to send in their hired goons into the fray as actors to make sure the public demonstrations become good and violent. But the masses, even with an invading foreign army, will be very hard to control. In spite of efforts to disarm the USA and compared to other countries, the U.S. public remains armed to the teeth, and many people are prepared to wait it out for extended periods of time. But how do you stop all activity? This is a question that the government, of course, is pondering. It's easy. One would simply unplug electricity to stop all activity and functionality to our tattered society. The planners in their think tanks already have learned from staging other naturally occurring events such as hurricanes, earthquakes, and tsunamis, to name a few, it will be far more convenient to stage a natural event to bring down the U.S. power grid. I see this coming as sure as you are reading this page right now, or as in this case you are hearing it on the radio right now. The public disinformation campaign started some time ago, culminating with NASA reporting recently that within the next solar cycle we are sure to have a complete meltdown of our power grid due to a solar flare. This prediction could be interpreted as simply a NASA ploy for funding, but it is a wolf hidden in sheep's clothing. There is no scientific basis for imagining that the current solar cycle number 24 is any larger or more dangerous than any other in recorded history. In fact, it arrived very late and with extremely low, record-breaking low sunspot activity and is at best average. So why all the fanfare, NASA? Well, it seems that NASA's news release spin machine is working now in conjunction with its owners, the European Bank. And their goal is to put the final nails in the coffin of what we once called the United States of America. All the states are now financially bankrupt or on the verge of financial collapse. The Homeland Security web reaches down through the states to the local police forces, and the people are being tossed into the streets at a rate never seen before in history, including during the Great Depression. That was not an accident, and neither is the current financial collapse. Only this time you are going to lose your country over it. But none of this can happen without an event so powerful that will shut down every living creature and activity in this country. One could imagine all kinds of scenarios: a bio-attack, weather bombing, a staged terrorist attack on a nuclear facility. The list is long and distinguished, but none of them, I repeat, none of them, hold the capacity to take down every square inch of this country like a power outage of full-scale proportions. Everything depends on electricity. Very few people can sustain any activity without electricity. Any of the other methods would never shut down all activity. In fact, people in a bio or nuclear radiation dirty bomb attack just might go berserk and be far from controllable. So what's the scenario? I discussed this on my recent show of August 11th, last week, August 11th, 2011. And if you missed that show, be sure to catch it on the archive page on the web page. Okay, continuing here with my statement on the web page, it says, in fact, people in a bio or nuclear radiation dirty bomb attack just might go berserk and be far from controllable. So what is the scenario? It is important that I have to reiterate here in writing. Here is the scenario. Congress and the President, of course, will be pre-warned, as will many important people, through secret memos that will have them in the right place at the right time. And you might just look at 911 as a good example. Many will not know specifically that this is underway, speaking of the leadership and special people who will be pre-warned. I suspect it will be preceded by an economic collapse such as a Black Friday or Monday on the stock market, and also before investors in silver and gold certificates would be able to cash out as metal prices skyrocketed. This would allow carefully selected financial centers and people, the elite, to suck out all the money of the economy just before the planned event. All of this will come with a NASA announcement of a large-scale solar flare, such as an X-class solar flare that is earthbound. Possibly there would be a shadow of truth in the solar storm story, but that is not the point. The point is that NASA's controlled news spin agency has already primed the pump for the cover story. So everyone is expecting the devastating solar storm. And all the possible scenarios are already in print, so we have many prior articles just to justify the cover story, including, as a major effect, the collapse of the power grid. All we need is a solar storm a bit bigger than average and a little more Earth-directed than average. Economic panic hits, and voila, you have all the makings of a national crisis. An act of God. How convenient. Pulling the plug on the power grid would be the result of already well-planned activity, and no one would be any the wiser. Rebuilding the power grid would take on a national priority, and Obama, the New World Order puppet president, Obama would get his wish of building the new smart grid that would control every movement. Energy and its use would become highly controlled. You would not pump a drop of gas without a permit. Get the picture? Need I say more? When will this happen? Well, first of all, understand that all of the elements are well in place. Secondly, the NASA announcement would not come too far ahead of the actual event, since everyone would have forgotten it by the time the event hit. They have to give it a little time so it does not look too fishy. Thirdly, the economy is literally on the verge of collapse, and social unrest is hitting its peak. I'm sure computer models of society have already been studied for years to know exactly the correct time to pull the plug. We already know it will happen at a time when the children will be in school. A sure way to control the middle-class American families is to control the parents coming to pick up their kids. And of course, all for your safety's sake. Yes, all of the factors are in place. And lastly, what about a cover story to handle the alternative crowd of Americans who are waking up to the many factors of life? Well, here comes the well-fabricated Comet Elenin story with its laundry list of dates of alignments and sure Earth destruction. With the litany of phony attempts to alter and use my electrical nature of the solar system concepts and give legitimacy to certain dates, when there is no legitimacy to any of those dates relative to Earth effects. That's speaking of Comet Elenin. And the Comet Elenin ridiculous story that it's somehow going to affect Earth. Okay, reading on. Remember that the elite in the secret satanic rituals use numerology and astrological dating to predetermine dates of events that they consider sacred. I've always known that the Comet Elenin BS was integrally related with these types of activities and clearly meant to deceive the alternative thinking crowd. So what do the indicators tell me? You should be able to come to your own conclusions. These are complex topics. But people who have followed my work know and understand what I am saying. Only a full-scale power outage could really complete the aim of taking down and controlling from shore to shore the United States of America and put the final blow to a country already on its knees. And just remember, the scenario has its cover story already well in place. A massive solar storm predicted by NASA that will come in the next solar cycle, sure to take down the power grid. Now that NASA is a space agency with no ability to go into space, it appears they have a new charter. The Passover was where the Israelites were told to paint the blood of a lamb, to kill a lamb and have it in the house. They had to seal all the doors and windows and stay inside until word was passed that it was okay to leave. Now, why would you do something like that? Well, let's come over to the Western Hemisphere, where the Mayans did the same thing. They have a ritual in the Mayan Popol Vuh where they talk about this, and the Mayans continued this just like the Israelites have the Passover. They had the same ceremony where they would paint the blood of an animal over the door, seal the doors. That means so no air will enter or leave that structure, and they go inside into hiding. And only to emerge, in the case of the Mayan celebration, they would emerge the next morning. But in the case of the Passover, they were in there for a long time. Now, why on earth would you do such a thing? And the real reason is, let's look at the cause of all of these events when Moses was leaving Egypt with the Israelites. That was because there was a large comet passing through the solar system at that time, and Earth was passing through the tail of the comet at that time, and that's where the poisonous gases from the large comet were going to affect and basically kill people. We know from comet studies, from small comets that are seen in the solar system today, not the big massive comets like Venus. The Venus comet was captured by Jupiter, came into the solar system, and eventually became the planet Venus. That's what my scientific work explains. My books explain how the electrical discharge comets, the plasma discharge comet model, explains how comets, the big comets, can have their orbits circularized because of the tail drag of the comet. The comets are like giant cosmic vacuum cleaners, and so if Earth passes through this tail, arsenic and other poisons are in the tail, so that's where the poisonous air would come from. So the Passover was a time when the people had to go into their houses, seal them, and not come out until they were given word that it was okay. And you can imagine they probably had small animals that they would let outside the house one by one to test and see if that animal died. Then they would know not to go out yet. Only if they let an animal out and the animal survived for the next day or so could they finally come out. But the poisonous gas is definitely coming from a comet. And you see all of the other events that occurred during the days of Moses. So the painting of blood over the door and the sealing of all the gaps and air cracks in the doors was because of that. Now I'm going to also talk about the 10 plagues of Egypt. Some people believe there were 7 plagues, but at any rate, the first one was blood, that everything turned to blood. Remember the prophecies, the end days prophecies, the moon will turn to blood. What is red that comes from a comet tail? Well, sulfur dioxide is one. A large comet that extends out into the region of Jupiter, there's a good quantity of sulfur dioxide that exists out there, and it's kind of an orange color. It's like a blood-looking color. There may be other things that happened at the time, but if we went through the comet tail, everything would be coated. And I remember, this is kind of a joke, I remembered somebody from the tropics once came when I was a kid, and came up to the Minnesota where I was a kid, and they said they wanted to know about snow. And they said, now is snow going to be all over the place? I mean, over on the sidewalk and out in the street too? And I said, yeah. It's going to be like, yeah, it's going to be on the sidewalk and the street too. And of course, we grew up with snow, knowing that it snows everywhere, all over the place, it's everywhere. But they couldn't imagine that it would snow. Why would it snow in the street too? Well, it's like the sulfur dioxide coming in from the comet tail. It was everywhere. It was in the air. And the red hand of the angel of death that came into the upper atmosphere, the auroras, you can see this happening. And as the fingers of red filtered down and dispersed in the atmosphere, went into the water, into the streams, into the rivers, into the lakes, and into every place where there was water, and turned it red and made it poisonous so that you couldn't drink it. That's why if something like this happens, you're going to need a water filter and a pre-filter. You got to get rid of this stuff. You can't drink that poisonous water. So that was the first plague of the 10. Then come the frogs. Well, gee, where do frogs live? Frogs live in the ground. And in a place like Egypt, the frogs would have a good lifestyle under the ground, but they can't live above the ground in that dry, hot climate. So what does frogs all over the place tell you, the second plague of Egypt, the second plague of Moses? Well, the frogs every place, what's happening when a comet comes by? It's putting up an electrical field around the Earth, and that field is translated into the Earth. When we were kids, we would take a 12-volt car battery out into the backyard before we went fishing. We would take a car battery and take 2 wires and stick them down into the ground. And what would happen? In about 5 minutes, all of the worms were crawling up out of the ground, Hundreds of them. You had all the worms you needed to go fishing. That's what we did. Why? Because that electric current through the ground forces up those little critters, and they all come out of the ground. In fact, we got some frogs that way too. Okay, so that is the effect of an electrical plasma discharge comet coming by Earth. What about the next plague of gnats? The fourth plague was flies. Well, the same thing. When insects, if you really realize in a place like Egypt, those insects likewise live under the ground. And they have, there's no trees, there's no vast amount of vegetation, so insects, it's sometimes said that the majority of life in the world is in the form of insects, and they live in the ground. And so, once again, as the comet passes by, setting up electric fields, and that electric field is pulsating, it's going to force all of the critters out of the ground. So you have first the frogs, then the gnats, then the flies. Then you have the livestock dying. So once again, you have the livestock trying to drink this poisonous water, and they're not going to last long. You don't have urns and water, vats of water. The livestock have to drink the water that's outside, that is in naturally occurring ponds. So in drinking that, pretty soon all the livestock are going to be dead. That's the fifth plague. You can see where this is coming from a comet. The next one was boils on the skin. And once again, there are viruses that come in a comet tail. Flu and other types of viruses. That's one of the things that you would expect, an exposed skin, that the viruses attack. Okay, this comes right after the flies. Well, flies biting, the boils that I see here in my mind's image are the type of boils you get from staph infection, which would be in an area, and if you have enough insect bites, especially flies that carry that bacteria, then you're going to get welts on your body, and very devastating. A lot of people actually die from this, certainly before they had antibiotics, etc., to fight these. The next thing that came was hail. Now, what an unusual thing for Egypt, never having seen hail before, and all of a sudden hail is falling from the sky. What does that mean? That means water. It's typically not a place where you're going to expect hail to be falling. So you have thunderstorms. Thunderstorms, the water raises up, forms around dust particles. Remember that hail, if you ever look at it, it looks like an agate. It's layers and layers of water that freeze as the hail blasts up in the thunderstorm, falls down, and goes up and down through this cycle until it gets so heavy it finally falls down. And you can have hail balls the size of a softball that come crashing down. But at any rate, hail was not your average weather phenomenon in Egypt. So hail, where does that come from? Once again, you have a passing comet, you have water, you have thunderstorms due to the electrical activity, and hail in a place where it has never been seen before. Next come the locusts. The locusts come in waves once again, probably from a distance. In a distant land, they came in waves like locusts will do. The locusts live once again where? Under the ground. They hibernate there, and they come out every number of years. But once again, with the electrical activity of the comet, out they come. The next was darkness, that the land was covered with darkness. Well, once you get into that comet tail, you're not going to see much. It's going to block the sun, the light of the sun, and the Earth is going to be cast into darkness. Now remember, we don't have a good reading on how long each of these plagues last. And there's a lot of distortion in history, but basically we know that darkness was the second